Alright, I watched a video today from Rabbi David Bar Chaim, who he makes a lot of videos. The videos are pretty popular. I mean, I know people who know him personally. I never met him. I don't necessarily agree with everything he has to say, but that's okay. I mean, Judaism has always been a religion which, I got in trouble for saying this, I remember, but that in Judaism, I remember when I was Rav in Richmond, I once said, in Judaism, this is sanctified, and some people didn't like that I said that, but it's very true, that we have different views, we're not unified, in all of our viewpoints. There are some basic things, monotheism is probably the number one basic idea of Judaism. But that's okay. Everything. Turn that off. It's okay. We don't all have to agree on everything. But this video, I would have to say I agree wholeheartedly with what he has to say, especially because of the way he presented it. He didn't say that certain practices are wrong. He just said there's a time and a place, and I agree. The question was, does davening take too long? And he brings several tshuvos, and probably the most striking from the Rambam is that yes, the way we have shul services today absolutely takes too long. Now, I love to daven long. The Gemara says, it would be a wonderful thing for a person to daven all day long. It's a beautiful thing to daven. But not everybody has the wherewithal to do that. And so where do we find the balance? The Mishnah very famously says, and as Rabbi Bar Chaim mentioned, Chasidim Rishonim hayu shoyim shoachas, mispalim shoachas, shoyim shoachas lifnei tefillah, mispalim shoachas, they would meditate for an hour before davening, they would daven for an hour, and they would meditate for an hour after davening. Now, it's not clear that this word shoachas necessarily means how we understand a 60-minute hour, or even the idea of 1/12 of the daylight or 1/12 of the nighttime, as we call it, Shosmanias, one of the 24 units of the day, which theoretically, when the days are longer, the daylight hours are longer, that unit would be longer, and the night, and during the night, would be shorter, and reverse. That's in the summer, and the reverse in the winter. Sometimes the word shah, hour, just like in English, means just the time, spending some time, and this is what we do talking with the Shemona Esrei, the Zohar Kodesh calls the Amidah, and that's become a popular term because none of our prayers today have 18 blessings. Only 18 blessings. We have 19 blessings now, and the other prayers, the Amidah prayers, generally have 7, except like on Shabbos and Yom Tov and Musaf on Rosh Chodesh, and then Musaf on Rosh Hashanah has 9 blessings, but we'll never have exactly 18. We'll have 19, which includes 18, but because we have the Birkas Aminim. But that being said, the question is, again, our prayer service is too long. Now, I remember I was a teenager. I was starting to keep mitzvahs, and I would go every year to the Wayne County Fair. And as today, I love the old movies. And there was one fellow there who was Jewish who would sell sepia tone pictures of the old movies, and I would buy them. I enjoyed talking to him, and I would buy them and frame them and put them up in my room. I still have a lot of them. And he told me, he tried putting on tefillin every day. I think he said tefillin or something else. He didn't pronounce it. But he said with the prayers it was too long. He couldn't make a commitment like that. And I didn't want to be too pushy or anything else, but you don't have to say all of those prayers. And the fact is, it's still a mitzvah to put on tefillin, even if you don't say any prayers. You just take a few minutes to put on tefillin without saying anything, or maybe just saying the Shema. But there's a base. If people were just aware of what the basic requirements of daily prayer were, theoretically, you could, the general practice that we see in Orthodox and in observant conservative congregations will be like this: that we have the morning prayer service, generally in a synagogue, will take an average about 40 minutes. Some places might get it done in 25 minutes. Some places it might take an hour, especially when there's more to say, there's Torah reading or Hallel or Musaf. But the average is 40 minutes, 45 minutes for the morning service on a weekday. And then the afternoon and evening services, 10, 15, 20 minutes each. So generally, most synagogues recite them together. So, you're spending a half hour, maybe 35, 40 minutes at night for the afternoon and evening services combined. Now, the thing is, most people, the actual Shemona Esrei, which is the main prayer, say in 2 or 3 minutes. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Some people, if they pray very slow, 5 minutes. That's of course if they're familiar with the text, which most people who pray 3 times a day get familiar, at least after a while. And that's the prayer par excellence. That's the main part of the prayer. And the Shema is a mitzvah to recite, and therefore, so we recite the Shema with blessings before and after it. That's our main obligation to the synagogue. Of course, the morning blessings, we should say, whether you get to synagogue early enough and you say it, or you get to synagogue later and you don't say it. It's the question, You say it then, you say it at home, you say it in the synagogue, just you have to say it at some point before we pray generally. And that's about it. Like, what's this, why does it take so long? It should theoretically, what you have to do in the synagogue in the morning, you could be in and out theoretically in 10 minutes, and at night also between the two you could be in and out in 10 minutes. Well, sometimes people in the synagogue, they want to say the prayers a little slower. That's one thing. And the other thing is they say extra things, and this is what Rabbi Bar Chaim was addressing, this question of the extra Kaddish and the extra readings that we do. Now, he made it clear that these extra readings are, even according to the Rambam, meritorious and wonderful things to do. And if you have a chabura, you have a group that they get together and they and they want to engage in these extra prayers and saying extra Kaddish and things like that, even though what he said with the Rambam is not so clear about the extra Kaddishes, exactly how many should be said. He said certainly Kaddish Rabbanan is in order, but some of these others might be questionable. And how many are said and so forth. He said that's something you should do on your own time, basically. And if you have your own chabura, a group that wants to go beyond the letter of the law, it's a beautiful thing. But it shouldn't be imposed upon the community. And that's what Rabbi Bar Chaim was discussing there in that video. And the fact of the matter is, he's right. I mean, historically, when the Hasidic movement began, and even all throughout, up until the war, when those communities mostly were wiped out, there was an understanding that there was a main town synagogue which followed the Ashkenazic rite, and then there would be a shtibel where the Hasidim davened. The Hasidim did not impose their approach on the community. They understood that they have a chabura who are seeking something different, something extra beyond the letter of the law, but they did not impose this on the community, even if the communal Rav, who was hired by the community, happened to be Hasidish. For example, we look in a big town like Satmar, which is not a Hasidish town. They hired Rabbanim often, who, particularly the famous Satmar Rav, who in his personal practices he was Hasidish, but he did not seek to impose the Hasidish minhagim on the average balabas in town. The main shul remained, as far as I know, Ashkenaz, even though they had a Hasidish Rav. And the Rebbe would often daven with Hasidim, not his own Hasidim, but a Hasidish shtibel in town. It didn't have this idea. Now, when Samarov came to America, he didn't really intend it to be like a Hasidus, the way it developed. But he said that essentially many things that, what he established independently. job of a Rav in Europe, almost anywhere in Europe, both by Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, Hasidish, Litvish, Yakish. One of the main things, and it's still generally mentioned in a contract, like when I had my contract with the Young Israel congregation called Emes in Richmond, even though in the contract it was stated that I was to say a drasha every Shabbos, it also mentioned a drasha for Shabbos Hagadol and Shabbos Shuva. And the idea, why is that mentioned in the contract? If you know, historically, it wasn't the common thing that we have now in America for a Rav to deliver a drasha, a sermon, every Shabbos. And still, in the Hasidic shuls, for the most part, they maintain the old minhag. The Rav doesn't deliver like how we're used to in America. Usually it's after the Torah reading, but in some communities it's before the Torah reading, that the rabbi of the synagogue will deliver a sermon. Some places there's even somewhat of a sermon both before and after the Torah reading, or some kind of explanation or something like that before and then the sermon after. That was not something that was commonly done in Europe. Most places, you only heard from the Rav twice a year. On Shabbos would be Shabbos Hagadol and Shabbos Shuva, and also there would be a drasha like, on Yom Kippur, maybe Rosh Hashanah also, but certainly Yom Kippur, like before Kol Nidre and before Ne'ilah. The drasha also, and that would be it. You wouldn't have a drasha. It was like how we have in American shuls. Excuse me. So, but that being said, so the Rav would. Why am I mentioning this? So Satmar Rav, when he came to America, he stopped giving Shabbos Hagadol drasha, Shabbos Shuva drasha, for two reasons. One, the main reason why he didn't give these drashas is that he recognized, first of all, that he was popular, and second of all, that he was not the only show in town, in Williamsburg. So, in order to, even though to some people it might sound arrogant, but it's being realistic. They say Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky, he was appointed on the London Bezdin, and he wound up in court because he was trying to fix all the problems that were there, particularly with kashrus, and he wound up in court. He had to defend himself. no Kehillah that hired him. He formed the Kehillah himself, and the people who had membership in the Kehillah, had membership in the congregation, chose to follow him, not that they got together and hired him. So therefore, he was under no contractual obligation really to do anything, and so he was under no contractual obligation to give Shabbos Hagadol Drasha or Shabbos Shuvah Drasha. Although he did address in the Yonim of Shabbos Hagadol and Shabbos Shuvah in the Shalashudis Torah, which he delivered every week. That was when he delivered his sermon every week, was by Shalashudis, and also by the Tish Friday night, sometimes by the Tish Shabbos day when he was younger. That really, in America, didn't really have the Tish during the day Suda, generally. Maybe in the earlier years he did. But in Europe, of course, he gave us Shabbos Hagadol Drasha, Shabbos Shuvah Drasha. That was his job. That was what he was hired to do. So, that all being said, so that he made his own bris medrash, and people decide to daven there. So then he made it nusach svar because of the oil and the daven there. That's what they davened. But he wasn't, and so therefore it goes on there. It doesn't have a din of a town shul. The way, of course, in Brooklyn, there are very few places that have such a din in halacha. Even there are a few left, very few, and most of them are almost empty. But in general, you have the yeshivas, you have a batei medrash. You don't have a basic knesses. You know, the way that was traditional. You know, you have a bris medrash. You have, most of the shuls that we have today actually have a din of a bris medrash, which is a higher kedusha than the basic knesses. Generally, you don't have the idea of a synagogue. You have every basis of bris medrash is a study hall. Now, so that being said, and we daven there, and in the bris medrash, you can have even, well, let's say like where we live, our bris medrash in White Lake, we have the one bris medrash, and that's the bris medrash for the town, because there's nowhere else that's open all year. But the thing is that it was established privately, meaning the originally established synagogue went away from Torah. So and the members of the Kehillah who wanted to have a place to daven, they formed this bris medrash. So it doesn't necessarily have it's a complicated issue, because in a way, the Rav there, he has the din of the Marda Asra that he was established by the Kehillah as a Rav, and it's a complicated issue, but in essence, he's the chief rabbi of the town, and really, as the Rav, he has bailas over every bris medrash in town, because he's Marda Asra of the town, and every shul, even the one that chose that they want to go away, really Me'ikar Hadin, he's the Rav there too, really Me'ikar Hadin, and what they're doing is connected more than just the fact that they violate halacha in their practices, but what he does, but Me'ikar Hadin, he's the chief rabbi there, and he he's the Mar da Asra over the town. And essentially, nobody really has the right to have anything else going on there without his rishus. But they're basically Messiah of the Din, they're in violation of halacha. The way they operate. I mean, they're essentially they're stealing from the founders. They're stealing from the dead. Founders of that shul made it an Orthodox shul. If they wanted to form a conservative congregation or non-Orthodox or whatever, non-Orthodox, they should have built their own building and started new instead of taking over the existing town shul. Is what they did. And basically everything that goes on there has a din of gezel. It's theft with the Temple Bethel, Congregation Temple Bethel. It's theft from the community, Al-Pi Din Torah. But that's neither here nor there, because there's nothing to do about it, because they don't care about halacha. They spit in the face of Torah. That being put aside, the halachic issues here, the question going back in general is the davening too long? And in essence, again, if someone wants to open a Chabad house and they like to say a bunch of extra kaddishes at the end, and that's their right in the Chabad house, but they shouldn't go and impose that in the town shul. And again, if you have, even in the town shul, Rabbi Bar Chaim said, you have 10 people who are willing to stay around and don't have a problem. There's nothing wrong to say an extra kaddish. There's nothing wrong even to have a separate minyan, to have a different minyan besides the main minyan. That people know this minyan is going to take longer than the main minyan, but the main thing is to have a minyan that's available to the community, or at least to let the people of the community know the schedule. It's difficult to do sometimes when you have a small community and you can't always get everyone together at the same time and things like that. I understand, but essentially, he's correct that the main part, people should be aware of what's ikr and what's tafel. What is the main part of the davening, and what's not the main part of the davening. What, and how to balance these questions in a realistic manner. So that's the first question, is, the adding to the extra things in the davening and so forth. And essentially, like I said, and most people, most Orthodox Jews, are used to adding these things, and they should not stop doing it. They should keep saying all the extra things that they have become accustomed to say. Probably has a din of a neder, and it would require Hataras Nedarim to stop saying these extra things. That's totally fine. People stop saying the Shir Shel Yom and the Leinu and P'timah Ketoras and all the extra things that we customarily say. However, we should recognize what's required and what's not. Not necessarily impose that on the tzibur without the consent of the tzibur. In general, this tzibur have consented to these things. That's just how things are today. So there's really nothing that actually should change, but people should be aware. The next video we're going to discuss a little bit more Thank you for watching. Other questions? All right. God bless. Thank you.